All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of our 4-part Population 101 series. This month, we'll be talking about writing op-eds and letters to the editor. First, my intro. We'll be introducing our other speakers later when their parts come up. My name is Sarah Bailey. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Population and Sustainability Organizer here. And I am in Buffalo, New York, also occupied Wenho-Renlan. And we have some housekeeping to cover first. Good job. Everyone's already on mute. And just if you could stay on mute until we get to the questions at the end. That'll just help us prevent any background noise or feedback during the presentations. You can choose whether or not you'd like to have your camera on. It's always nice to see actual faces when we're talking, but we understand if you, don't feel like being on camera today. Please be respectful and any questions and discussion after the presentation. And we'll definitely we have a part of this presentation that's designated for questions at the end. But if anything pops up during the presentation you'd like to ask, you can always just throw it in the chat and we'll get to it later and you don't have to worry about remembering it until the end. And the format of today's presentation, we have Kim, our media specialist, will be going over how to write letters to the editors and op-eds, and Kelly will be sharing some cool results from a recent survey that might help you inform your approach to writing your op-ed or letter to the editor. So with that, I will have Kim take it away.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kim Dinan, and I am the media specialist here at the center, working for the Population and Sustainability Group. And before we dive in to talk about op-eds and LTEs, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. My pronouns are she, her, and I am located here in Asheville, North Carolina. Also land of the Eastern Band of the Cherokee. And let's see, I have spent, before joining the center, I spent almost a decade as a writer. I worked for Backpacker Magazine and was the outdoor environmental news editor for Blue Ridge Outdoors, as well as a freelance writer for many years. And I also published a book, travel memoir called The Yellow Envelope, which came out in 2017. So with that, I will dive into talking about op-eds and letters to the editor. Like Sarah said, if you have any questions, just include them in the chat and I can get to them when I am done here with the presentation. So first things first, what are op-eds and LTEs? Well, they are, op-eds are longer pieces, opinion pieces that you submit to publications such as newspapers, sometimes magazines that have an online presence, and they are about 500 to 700 words. The purpose is to create thought or dialogue, discussion, take a deeper dive into a topic that you're interested in covering. A letter to the editor is what it sounds like, a letter to the editor responding to something that was published in a publication that you read. So perhaps there was a story in your local newspaper or an opinion piece that came out in a magazine and you disagreed with it. Well, what you would do in that situation is send a letter to the editor. And these are shorter, around 150, maybe 200 words, sometimes 250, never above that. And often the shorter, the better. They're more likely to be published than an op-ed. So if you're wondering, oh gosh, I have something to say about this and I'm not sure how I should respond, normally a letter to the editor makes more sense because the likelihood of it actually being published and getting in front of eyeballs is it's much more likely with an LTE. And it's also just a better way to rapidly respond because it's fairly easy to share your opinion in a couple hundred words and get it out the door the same day. So next slide here. How to identify a good opportunity. So when do you know when you should submit an op-ed or an LTE? Well, first of all, like I said, you read something and it gets you fired up. Maybe it's something totally egregious that is about environmental policy that your local government is considering passing, and you want to make sure that your opinion is heard. Well, this is a good opportunity. Um, but before you sit down and start firing off that LTE or the op-ed, you want to make sure that you meet the requirements of the publication. So sometimes you'll find that you want to respond to, uh, you were, let's say, visiting a friend in a different city and you were reading the newspaper and you want to respond to something you read there, but then you see that the requirements only they only publish local voices. So you want to make sure that you meet the requirements of the publication. Often, you also want to make sure that there's a local tie-in. So again, you live in an area, you're responding to something that's happening in that area. Sometimes, larger publications they cover national news, and there are opportunities to write letters to the editors there as well. But again, a local tie-in is going to give you a better chance at publishing. And, maybe that you have a very strong opinion about a certain topic, but you're not seeing it written at all in your local papers. One good thing to do in that scenario is to just follow the news on that topic. Sign up to get Google alerts, or log on to Google News and search the keywords and see what's being published out there. And if you have something to say about it, it's a good opportunity to then look up the submission requirements, see if that's a publication that makes sense to write an LTE or an op-ed to, and then go for it. All right, so first we are going to talk, next slide, please. We will talk about writing an effective letter to the editor, and then we will talk about writing an effective op-ed. I do want to let you know that Sarah, after the presentation, will email out two examples, or an example of an effective and published letter to the editor and another example of an effective and published op-ed. And I think she may also put those in the chat, so that when you sit down to write your own, you have an example to work off of. Okay, so here's some tips for writing a letter to the editor that's more likely to be published. The first is make sure that the publication accepts letters to the editor. Most do, although when we get to op-eds, there are less publications that accept op-eds, but most do accept letters to the editor. Although you want to make sure that there's also a clear and easy path to submit it. So sometimes, you will see that a publication publishes letters to the editors, but when you get online, you have no idea how to submit. You can keep digging, but sometimes it's just not worth your time in that instance. So once you see that they accept LTEs and that there's an easy way to submit your LTE, read and follow the submission guidelines. So again, you don't want to send in a 400-word letter when the max is 150. That's just a really great opportunity for an editor to just delete your letter without even reading it. So make sure you follow the submissions guidelines, and make sure that you are responding to an article that's already been published. So again, you might have something to say about a topic, but unless you're responding to something you've read in the publication, a letter to the editor is not the place to do that. You also want to respond quickly. So always within the week. It's better to respond day of. And if you can't do that, then in the next 2 or 3 days, because, multiple letters are published a day in some publications, and, they want timely, quick news and they want to move it along. So respond as quickly as you can and stick to a single point. And, this can be hard sometimes as a writer, especially when you have a whole bunch you want to say about something. But a letter to the editor is just not the place to do it. You don't have enough words. So stick to the thing that you really want to say, your main point, and build an argument around that and leave everything else for another day. You also want to get the facts straight, of course. So if you are citing, you know, pollution statistics, for example, you want to make sure that the information that you're citing is correct and that it comes from a reputable source. So not some, blog on the internet, but preferably, a governmental agency, for example. And you also want to appeal to ordinary readers. So you may, so let's say your day job, you're a scientist, and so you know the ins and outs of a certain topic, and you know all of the verbiage of, your the work that you do. But if the average Joe down the street doesn't understand what you're saying, or you're writing about something that's just doesn't concern them at all, then it's not very likely that your letter will be published. Some more tips here. Next slide, please. It's right from your point of view. So editors are most likely to publish letters that come from you as a member of your community, as a citizen, as a parent on the school board or someone that shops at the local grocery store. So, tell your story in 200 words or less and write it from your point of view. That is the most effective way to share a letter to the editor. You want to, of course, avoid personal attacks and insulting language. You can be fired up, but don't be rude. And, of course, have a friend or a partner read the letter before you submit it. It's always helpful to get another set of eyes on it. Make sure that what you're saying makes sense and is effective and doesn't have any typos. And let's see here. Finally, sometimes when you submit a letter to the editor, there will be like an online form to use. And if the publication provides one, that's what you should use. Other times you will be submitting using an email address. When you do that, you always want to copy your letter to the editor and paste it into the body of the email. Don't include it as an attachment unless for some reason the publication asks you to include it as an attachment. But if they don't specify, then make sure you just copy it and paste it into the body of the email. And that's because, editors don't like to receive attachments from people they don't know. It could be malware. It could be any number of things. You'll want to make sure that in the subject line that you include the words letter to the editor so the editor knows what you are submitting. And you also want to include your contact information in the letter, in the body of the email, including your name and your address and your daytime phone number. That won't be published, but editors like to know that they are publishing letters from real people. So they may reach out to you, give you a call, or email you to make sure that you are who you say you are before they publish your letter. All right, next slide here. Okay, so now we are going to talk about tips for writing an effective op-ed. And again, this is a bigger writing project. It's a chance for you to take a subject that you're passionate about or you're well versed in and build an argument and then share that argument with the readers of a publication. So before you sit down to write your op-ed, if you know where you want to submit it, then make sure you sit down and read a couple of the pieces that the publication has already, that they've published in the past. It's just good practice before you submit to any publication to do that so that you're familiar with the way that their pieces read, the kind of content they publish. And, you may find that, oh, wow, after reading all these op-eds, I noticed they only publish, pieces from the city council. They don't publish pieces from just the general public. So that's something that you will be able to see before you spend a lot of time writing an op-ed and then, it's not a good fit. So again, make sure that there's a clear and easy way to submit. Like I said before, letters to the editor are pretty, almost every publication will receive those, but that's not always true with op-eds. And and less so as time goes on. Op-eds are getting cut out of publications. Opinion editors are, being laid off. It's a strange time to be in media. So make sure again that there is that path to submission. And then before you sit down and dive into your topic, it's good practice to sit and write an outline. And I will show you an example of an outline here in just a moment. You always want to make sure that there's a news hook and that the news hook is clear. So if you want to write an op-ed about a lead smelting plant, for example, that is being proposed to be built in your community, and you want to respond to that, well, there's a clear news hook there. It's something that's ongoing, it's happening in your community. But if it is the middle of winter and you want to talk about the chlorine use at your local swimming pool, clearly there's not a great news hook at that time. So you need to be timely, and it needs to be relevant to what's happening right now, not 6 months down the road or even 6 months in the past. You want to keep your sentences short and your paragraphs short. Most of these will be published online, and writing for the internet is a little bit different than writing for something that we be published on paper. And so short sentences, short paragraphs, breaking up big blocks of text with white space just makes it easier for the reader. So you should do that as well. And you want to advocate through facts in your personal experience. So, again, if we're talking about this lead smelting plant that's going to be built, share your own personal story. Perhaps you're the parent of a child with asthma, and this plant is going to impact your entire family. Share that story. Let the reader and the editor know why this topic is so meaningful to you. All right, next slide here. So you're also going to want to support your argument with studies and facts. And like I said before, make sure that you choose good sources like government websites. Even here at the center, we have published a lot of studies on many topics. So you can check out our website, and maybe there are some sources on our site to back up some of your arguments. But you don't want to just, make big statements and claims without being able to back them up with facts. Again, you also want to move fast. You don't have to move as fast as you would with a letter to the editor. It doesn't have to be a same-day turnaround. But if you read something or are responding to something that's happening in the community, it's best to, get your op-ed written and out the door within a couple of days. Just like a letter to the editor, you want to have another set of eyes on it, have someone proofread for you, have someone read for clarity, make sure that the argument that you're building is clear and concise, that your reader doesn't have any questions, because if they do, the editor will likely have questions as well. And you will also want to include a bio. And this is a chance for you to explain, who you are, and again, why this topic is important to you. So maybe you are a scientist who knows about air quality in communities around lead smelting plants. Mention that in your bio. Or if you are a concerned parent, mention that in your bio. If it is, I guess, but if you are like, say, a really great tennis player, that doesn't need to go in your bio unless you are, writing an op-ed about, a forest that's going to be torn down to build a bunch of tennis courts. So again, include your bio, make it relevant. You also want to disclose any conflicts of interest. So if you are, you want to fight this lead smelting plant, but you are also on, I don't know, the board of the lead smelting plant, you are going to want to make that known, because if you have a conflict of interest and it isn't disclosed, it causes a serious problem for the publication if and when they find that out. And then finally, just like a letter to the editor, you are going to want to copy and paste your op-ed when you submit it and put it into the body of the email. No attachments, again, unless the publication requests attachments. And then you will sign your name and send it off and hope that your op-ed is published. With an op-ed, it does make sense to follow up after you've submitted. So, you submit something on a Friday, you can wait a week and then follow up next Friday to see if they're going to publish it. And if they decide not to publish your piece, you should always have a backup option. An op-ed is different than a letter to an editor where you're responding to something that was written in as one specific publication. Your op-ed might make sense for a number of publications that exist in your town or your state. So have a couple of options. You're going to have your first choice, but if you aren't picked up there, then submit it to your next choice. The thing you don't want to do is send the op-ed to everybody at once. That is not a good practice. So again, submit it to one place. You can even let them know that they have that you've exclusively submitted it to them. And then when they pass, go on to the next place, but do it one at a time. Okay. So I just want to run through an op-ed on the next slide, please, an outline of an effective op-ed. So this is when you're building that, when you're outlining your op-ed, this is a good way to do it. So the first thing you want to do is you want to start with a strong, vivid lead that grabs attention. So again, if we're talking about that lead smelting plant, you might want to say something along the lines of, this morning, I placed an oxygen mask over my daughter's nose as she struggled to breathe. So that is a very strong image. It captures the reader right away. And as a reader, you want to know more. And then the next paragraph is going to dive into the context of the story. You're going to lay out your argument. What do you want and why do you want it? So in this example, you may say something like, it's deplorable that city council would consider building a lead smelting plant in the center of town. As a community, we should rise up against this because it's terrible for our children, it's terrible for the health of the community. And then after that, you're going to go into a couple of one background paragraph. So this is why. You may say the lead in our the air in our valley is already some of the most polluted in the state, and we can't handle more pollution here. The rates of children with asthma in our city are 10 times higher than the national average. So again, you're building context that this is bad, and it's bad for all of these reasons. Then you go on to 2 or 3 paragraphs with supporting points. And this is where you can pull data from studies. You can look at, EPA websites and really build your argument here. So, you may talk about the air quality in towns with lead smelting plants, or you may point to places where these have been built in other communities and you demonstrate the fallout of that. So you're building your argument and you're supporting your points. And then finally, you're going to end it with a sentence or two that wraps up your argument and leaves the reader, moved, hopefully. So you may end this op-ed with something like, my wish for my daughter and all the children is to breathe free of environmental pollutants. And we need to ensure that a lead smelting plant is not built, or we sacrifice the future of our families. And then at the end, you'll include your bio, your relevant bio again. And that's that. You'll get another set of eyes on it before sending it off. All right. So that is all I have. And if any questions came up, I would love to answer them now.